Caring versus caretaking. Caring. Acting in a caring way towards someone involves empowering them to be their personal best by empowering them to take action that will lead to them becoming their highest and best self. Caring involves encouraging others to troubleshoot their own problems and to be proactive in seeking solutions. Caring about someone involves setting healthy boundaries, so we aren't jumping in to rescue them, because then it becomes caretaking, and when we are taking care of another otherwise capable adult, that's a problem. It's important that we let them make mistakes and to suffer the natural consequences of their actions if they continue to make poor decisions. This can be really hard to do and a really thin line to walk. But it's important for us to not get in the way of them learning the lessons they need to learn, because pain is the catalyst for growth and change, and self-esteem is built when we overcome adversity. Caretaking. Taking care of a person in a way that doesn't match their age or ability level is considered rescuing and enabling behavior, because it doesn't allow the person to grow into their personal best. Caretaking involves jumping in and fixing things in order to prevent the other person from suffering the consequences of their actions. It's doing a child's homework for them. It's calling in sick to work for an alcoholic spouse. It's paying an adult child's bills or doing their laundry. Caretaking behavior tends to come from a well-intended place, but it is damaging to both the caretaker, it can be exhausting and builds resentment. It is also damaging to the one being taken care of because they aren't learning how to figure things out for themselves and handle difficult situations in life. A caretaking dynamic is an unequal, one-way dynamic that leads to the caretaker feeling angry, resentful, and worn out at having to always be there when the other person needs them, and they are usually the one who is continually focused on trying to fix their partner or fix the damage to their relationship caused by their partner. Many caretakers feel that taking care of others is a deeply rooted part of their personality, and they have a hard time having friendships and relationships with others that are equal. If this describes you, I highly recommend taking some time to examine the different friendships and relationships you've had in your life to see in what ways you were acting as a caretaker, and to try to slow down that often knee-jerk reaction so many of us have with wanting to jump in and rescue others. New story. My ex was an alcoholic, a womanizer, and a thief, stealing tens of thousands of dollars from his company. I continually believed all of his lies, excuses, and fake tears, and made excuses for him. It's to the point now where our adult children want nothing to do with him, and they are angry with me. I guess I can't say I blame them. He's destroyed this family, and I let him, not realizing the damage that was being done, and thinking that my love and support could change him. Sarah. Fairness versus growth. Fairness. Many people who go through abuse of any kind struggle with feelings of anger and rage when the relationship is over, especially when they realize that what they went through was abusive. They often, understandably, feel that what happened to them isn't right or fair, and they want to know when karma is going to come settle the score so that their abuser suffers as much or more than they do. It is hard to watch the abuser move on to their next target and live out this perfect life, or seemingly skip through life with no consequences, while the target is left with their life and sense of self blown apart. However, and this is a hard truth to hear, the reality is that life isn't about fairness, life is about growth. And growth is usually sparked by pain that pushes us out of our comfort zone into doing something different. It's important to realize that many people's comfort zones aren't comfortable, especially if they are in or recently out of an abusive relationship. A comfort zone is nothing more than a way we are accustomed to doing something, and a person may be in a comfort zone of depression, anger, isolating themselves, you name it. While watching an abuser suffer some sort of consequences can be satisfying and very validating, this may never happen. What you do have control over is to focus on making what happened to you somehow work for your highest and greatest good. The best way to get revenge or to win is to not let what they did destroy you. The best revenge is to dig deep and find your fight, and to decide that you are going to have a great life in spite of what they did to you. This isn't easy, but it is possible, and setting the intention that this isn't going to ruin your life is a big first step. Growth. To cling to ideas of what we think is fair and how things should be will only cause you pain, and it will keep you stuck. This is especially the case involving any kind of trauma. I can understand wanting justice and wanting to be heard. I can understand wanting them to suffer like how they made you suffer. To feel that way is normal, but please don't let your feelings of rage and anger keep you stuck in wanting them to suffer. There is a lot of growth that can happen in your life because of what you went through. I realize it's growth that you didn't sign up for, but here we are, and what's the other option? To stay angry and pin your happiness on them suffering? No. You've been through enough, and although this may be the hardest thing you'll ever have to do, I encourage you to lean into this pain and realize that it has a very important message for you. That message is, you deserve better. Love doesn't hurt. It's a lack of love that hurts. You are worthy of love, and the best person that can give that to you is you. All trauma is transformative, and it can either make us or break us. But the good news is we don't have to wait around passively and see how the chips may fall. We can decide that we are not going to let this destroy us, and that instead we will squeeze out as much personal growth from this as we possibly can. Like I mentioned before, life is not about fairness, it is about growth. And in order to survive under harsh conditions, we must learn to adapt. And if we don't, we will die, either physically or emotionally. Now, I realize that you might be thinking to yourself that you are a million miles away from thriving. Hell, right now a good day for you might be getting out of bed or not contemplating suicide. I get it. I've been there. But please know that the pain of this isn't always this intense. It doesn't last forever, and that many of your best days are still ahead of you. And perhaps most importantly, you can overcome this. You don't need to have all of the answers today, but I encourage you to dig your heels in and decide that you are going to take what happened to you and use it towards your highest and greatest good. Life isn't happening to you, it's happening for you, and this may sound really hippie woo-woo, but I also believe that life, and especially events like these, are happening for us as a species. See, on a micro level, pain happens so that we grow from it, and on a macro level, it's happening so that each species evolves. And this might sound really out there, but I fully believe that those of us who have been through an abusive relationship of any kind become a lot more in tune with our intuition. These hard-earned skills that we can dig out from being abused take a bit to refine, but in time you may come to realize that you are a lot more awake to problematic behavior, as well as to your own emotions, than other people who haven't gone through something similar. In addition, if you are in a support group, you are probably shocked by how many things other people are going through. You are probably shocked by how many other people are going through the same things as you. I fully believe that not only is abuse an epidemic that no one seems to really know about, but that it's part of the next stage in human evolution, which is an emotional evolution, one that you are on the leading edge of. News story. I really felt like my life was destroyed beyond repair after being involved with a narcissist. It wasn't until I came across people in a support group talking about how they were able to get so much personal growth out of this experience that I began to get curious. I really felt like my life was blown apart and would never be the same. I've since shifted out of the mindset from being angry that things aren't fair and that I wasn't treated fairly, which is putting it mildly, to squeezing as many personal growth lessons out of this as I possibly could. Although I wouldn't want to repeat what I went through, in many ways I've learned a ton about myself and really feel what happened to me was a big wake-up call. I had been going around instantly trusting everyone and taking them at face value, even when my gut instincts were warning me not to. I had no deal breakers and continually gave people chances until they caused me so much harm I couldn't handle it anymore. I thought that's what normal people did, and I think a lot of normal people do, which is why so many of them are living lives of silent desperation. I didn't realize that I was being nice and accommodating to a point that I was continually hurting myself. Today I am so much more in alignment with my feelings and boundaries, and my life is so much smoother today because of that. I feel like I'm seeing things clearly for the first time ever. These experiences we have in life truly are about growth, especially if the other option is to let them destroy us, which is not a good option. I've learned that some of the most intense growth comes from the most intense pain. Marie. Trauma bonds versus healthy bonds. Trauma bonds. Trauma bonds are the result of the good times being really good, the idealization phase, and the bad times being really bad, the devalue or discard phase, which is what tends to make up the highs and lows of an abusive relationship. This emotional coaster ride is a type of intermittent reinforcement. These trauma bonds are the bonds that are forged between the captive who empathizes with their kidnapper, the prostitute who loves her pimp, the abused spouse who loves their partner, the cult member who defends their cult leader, the hostage who befriends or defends their captor, or the abused or neglected child who defends their abusive parent's behavior. 5 elements are often present during the creation of a trauma bond. 1. There is a one-sided dynamic where one person is controlling and the other is being controlled but may not realize it. 2. The abusive behavior is sporadic and is characterized by intermittent reinforcement, where the good times are really good and the bad times are really bad. 3. The target experiences extreme mental distress and confusion, cognitive dissonance, and, at a subconscious level, denies what is going on to themselves in order to convince themselves that the relationship can survive, as well as so they can protect themselves emotionally to avoid an emotional collapse. Because it's a very hard pill to swallow to realize that their relationship with this person was never real, is never going to be what they need, and that they need to leave. It's hard for any of us to leave a situation when we are getting some of our needs met, especially when we have a high emotional investment in things working out. During either psychological or physical abuse, disassociation is often present, where the target feels like this isn't happening to them. They might feel as if they are in a movie or in a state of shock. Disassociating from what's going on allows the target to compartmentalize the abusive aspects of the relationship in order to focus on and stay for the positive aspects. This is done by rationalizing or normalizing what they experienced, which many targets do by telling themselves it could always be worse, no one is perfect, it's due to their childhood, or it's partly or completely my fault. 4. The more invested, physically, emotionally, financially, a person is in the relationship, the more driven they will be in order to stay, and in turn the more driven they will be to defend what they are experiencing. So in order to smooth over the mental distress and resulting confusion they are experiencing from their heart and head not being in alignment, they might tell themselves that they are staying because this is what commitment is all about, and they might further reinforce this belief by becoming more invested in their faith. They might also go to therapy, delve into self-help books, or sign up for a marriage retreat trying to figure out how they can learn to trust again or be a better partner, thinking if they just changed, then the relationship can be saved. Because if leaving is out of the question, then they are going to have to justify to themselves why they are staying. The easiest way to do that is to make the issue their fault, because at least that way they have some sort of control over things changing, even though this is a false sense of control, because they aren't responsible for their partner's treatment of them. 5. The worse they are treated, the more they will have to justify to themselves and to others why they are staying. They do this by avoiding others who have issues with their significant other, because this contributes to their mental distress, cognitive dissonance. They will also be They also will be inclined to surround themselves with people who support their decision to stay with an abusive partner, thereby creating a support system full of people with very dysfunctional, damaging, destructive, and potentially deadly beliefs about what commitment is. While trauma bonds are commonly associated with extreme situations involving harm or threats of harm to where the person being controlled is attempting to survive the situation, however, I'm going to assert that I think any type of one-sided, unhealthy bond between two people that is forged through any type of abuse or exploitation to any degree that results in a target defending the person who is using, abusing, exploiting, or neglecting them is a trauma bond. This is a big problem. In terms of trauma bonds with abusive people, surviving this relationship often means having the relationship, friendship, job position, internship, etc., continue and thinking that things can and will change. During this time, in an effort for the person to keep the relationship going, they often start walking on eggshells, thinking that if they can just change themselves and their behavior, that this will have a positive impact on their partner's behavior. Like any other type of intermittent reinforcement, however, sometimes it seems to work, and sometimes it doesn't seem to work. This thinking is reinforced if a narcissistic partner has bouts of decent or even ideal behavior, and leads their partner to think that finally things are turning a corner, only to realize down the road that they are up to the same things again, which leaves them emotionally devastated again. What the targets of abusive people don't realize, due to all the ongoing manipulation, false promises, lies, blame, or triangulation, is that their partner's behavior has nothing to do with them, even though it really feels like it does. Abusive people are only driven to do what they want, and sometimes that falls in line with what their partner wants, and sometimes it doesn't. Trauma bonds deepen when we gloss over the bad, focus on the good, and then continue to reassure ourselves that everything will be okay, that this relationship can be saved, even though to any sane outsider, things are really bad and we need to get the heck out of there. The thinking for a person who is wrapped up in those trauma bonds is that the relationship or dynamic can work if they can just please their captors enough. In terms of hostage situations, it's common for hostages to start ingratiating themselves toward their captors by proving their worth, by being quiet, running errands for them, helping to calm down other hostages, or otherwise becoming a part of the same team as their captors. In terms of abusive relationships, it's common for partners of abusive people to start ingratiating themselves by walking on eggshells, being people-pleasing, thinking that if they can just somehow prove their worth or stay out of the way, that their partner will eventually treat them right, or at least will stop physically or verbally abusing them. When crumbs of kindness, attention, or affection are given, the partner reinvests themselves into this team dynamic as an attempt to make things work. They think that things have finally turned a corner, and confuse all the pain that the abusive person is putting them through as somehow a positive bonding moment, and something that they can get through as a couple. These highs and lows are directly related to what's known as intermittent reinforcement. Intermittent reinforcement is a psychological term that was developed from an experiment involving rats, where the rats were trained to pull a lever in order to get food. At first, their environment was predictable, and there was a direct correlation to their behavior and getting their needs met. Pull the lever, get the food. And then the researchers changed the dynamic to where the rats weren't getting the direct reinforcement, but intermittent reinforcement. So sometimes they'd pull the lever and there would be food, and sometimes there wouldn't be. The rats continued to pull on the lever much more frequently now because they weren't sure if they were going to get fed, and they still held on to the hope that their actions could somehow still have some control over their environment. When people encounter trying to navigate the same type of unpredictable environment, they start trying to pull on that lever to figure out what they need to do in order to be treated with kindness, faithfulness, and honesty. So they may make sure not to confront their partner about them messaging strange people at all hours of the night, or they might not bring up any of their partner's past problematic behavior in an attempt to keep the peace, or they may get into really great shape in order to try and keep their partner faithful. And these attempts might seem to work for a while, until they find that their partner is cheating, lying, siphoning funds, yelling, name-calling, or hitting them again. In an abusive relationship, trauma bonds are forged through the good times that often involve attention and affection, and then are reinforced through the bad times, which involve abuse, fear, neglect, or terror. The effect that a trauma bond has on a person is the feeling of this us against them dynamic, where it's the abusive person and their partner against the world, and in their partner's eyes, they've been through so much together, when in fact they've really been put through so much by their partner. My guess would be that most people who find themselves in a one-sided marriage or relationship oftentimes tend to have similar types of trauma bonds with other people in their life, most likely their parents, friends, and many of the other significant relationships in their lives. Trauma bonds in motion tend to come across as, I love you, I'll do whatever needs to be done so that you stop hurting me, just please don't leave me, we can get through this. This is toxic and dysfunctional thinking at its worst. Let me stop for a moment and address the difference, as I see it, between trauma bonds and codependency, because not everyone in an abusive relationship is codependent. The way I see it, the difference between trauma bonds and codependency is that trauma bonds can be forged during a one-time event. For example, if they were held hostage in a bank robbery or got caught up in an online dating scam. However, the distinction here is one-time event. If the person in any other situation with friends, family, and significant others has healthy boundaries, then there aren't codependency issues present. However, if there is a long-standing pattern of being bonded to hurtful people or a series of one-sided friendships, work dynamics, familial relationships, and relationships with significant others, then this is a red flag that there is some codependency going on. Many people who struggle with codependency also struggle with knowing what healthy bonds, aka relationships, are and what healthy boundaries are. They have usually lived a life where they are used to settling for crumbs from others, crumbs of kindness, affection, attention, and often crumbs of loyalty, honesty, and being treated with dignity and respect from their partner, because somewhere along the line, they realized that in order to get attention and affection, they had to earn it, or they had to put everyone else ahead of themselves. And because it can be really hard for any one of us to see our own issues, many people don't realize that they have issues with boundaries, codependency, or trauma bonds, as they've been this way as long as they can remember. It's like the saying goes, the last thing the fish notices is the water. Please know you are not to blame for what happened. Most normal, decent people tend to think that other people have the same morals and values as they do, and because of this, they take others at face value. Healthy boundaries, what manipulative and abusive behavior is, and paying attention to our gut instincts are things that very few of us are taught. And once you realize what's going on, odds are you'll start working to get more in alignment with what is healthy for you, and you'll be shocked by how fast your life starts to change for the better. Signs that you are trauma bonded to someone. 1. You believe in commitment at all costs and think that being treated poorly isn't a reason to leave. You don't have deal-breaker behavior. You consider everything to be workable, even lying, cheating, stealing/siphoning household funds, active and destructive addictions, or abuse of any kind. The more you go through, the more you feel that this speaks to your level of commitment. If others see a problem with you staying, you tell yourself that they just don't value commitment like you do, or that they are jealous that you've been able to make things work. You realize that you are sinking yourself in order to save them, or in order to keep the relationship afloat. But this doesn't seem problematic. It seems compassionate and the right thing to do, even if doing so feels like it's slowly killing you. 2. You minimize or deny what is going on. If you tell your friends and family how your significant other speaks and behaves towards you, or that you caught them lying, cheating, stealing, etc., they are concerned for you. Yet you think this is just how you fight, or that they aren't the problem, It's the other woman or man that's the problem, or their childhood, or their addictions, or their anger issues, or that they just don't know how to communicate, or that you are somehow the problem. They've done worse in the past. That if only you could get through to them, or if only given enough time, understanding, patience, rehab, therapy, or religion, that they could change into being a good partner. 3. Things never change for long. You have repetitive fights about the same thing, over and over, and no one ever wins. There's never any insight. If you do feel that you got somewhere with the fight, that's all wiped out when you have the same fight about the same thing again, probably the next day. 4. You defend their behavior and distance yourself from people who have a problem with your relationship or your partner. When something major does surface, you find yourself complaining to others about what they did this time, but as soon as they get upset, you backpedal and are quick to justify and minimize their behavior. After all, you don't want to leave. You just want them to quit lying, cheating, stealing, manipulating, and otherwise treating you so poorly. 5. You feel addicted to them. Everything in your mind tells you to leave them, but the thought makes you feel panicky. Really, really panicky. If you do stop talking to them for a few days or weeks, you find yourself craving them and wanting to do whatever it takes, or wishing that they'd offer up any crumbs of an attempt to get you back so that this relationship can continue. 6. You keep holding out hope that this time things will be different. You often feel like Charlie Brown, who repeatedly kicks the football that Lucy holds, only to have her pull it out at the last minute. The idea that this time she won't pull the football continues to have power. The idea that this time she won't pull the football continues to have power despite her always pulling the football and you always landing on your back. 7. Walking on eggshells. You keep trying to convert your spouse into someone who treats you right, convince him to behave differently, or prove yourself to him. You think if only you can prove yourself, everything will be different. You try to get him to understand that what he does or says is hurtful to you. If only he would understand. 8. You don't like your significant other. You might feel like you love them, or even that they are your soulmate, but you don't like or respect them, and you are embarrassed and ashamed of their behavior and of how they treat you and your children. 9. You'd be upset if you found out your child, friend, or sibling was dating someone like them. Although you can't leave your spouse, and even say you don't want to, you'd be horrified if your child brought home a new partner and declared they were just like your significant other. 10. You feel confused, devastated, angry, and exhausted. You want to leave because they treat you with such a lack of respect and dignity, but you also don't want to because you feel they are your soulmate. You are angry with them, but feel guilty for leaving. You feel like you give and give, but it's never enough. You wish you knew what it took to get through to them, or to make them value this relationship for good. You can't tell if this relationship is a fairy tale or a total nightmare. Healthy bonds. Healthy bonds develop between two people over time as two people go through the highs and lows of life together. Healthy bonds are based on mutual trust, support, dignity, and respect, and include open, honest, sincere, and solutions-oriented communication and behavior. Healthy bonds. Healthy bonds develop between two people over time as two people go through the highs and lows of life together. Healthy bonds are based on mutual trust, support, dignity, and respect, and include open, honest, sincere, and solutions-oriented communication and behavior. Healthy bonds are formed when both individuals are able to get their wants and needs met, both by themselves and within the relationship or dynamic. There is a feeling of certainty, clarity, and calm around the other person because appropriate trust has been established and maintained. There is a feeling of deep appreciation and admiration for the other person. There is no hidden selfish agenda or behavior. There is no using, abusing, or exploiting the other person. There is no manipulating another person's emotions in order to keep them around. There is no being dragged through hell, hoping that someday the other person will treat them right. There is no hiding their partner's mistreatment of them or their relationship from others because they are embarrassed by how they're being treated. There is no, I love you, but I hate you. News story. I was married to a man who lied, cheated, and manipulated me since the day we first met. Of course, it took me over 10 years to realize this, and another 5 years to really fully end that relationship and to stop getting sucked in by more of his lies and false promises. I kept thinking that if he said he was sorry, that I owed him another chance. I dropped domestic violence charges on him multiple times because I felt sorry for him. It took me years to realize he was just saying and doing whatever he needed to say and do in order to keep me around. And what's so sick and sad is I somehow thought all these highs and lows, and all the other women, the abuse, the lies, and him continuing to come back to me somehow meant that he must have really loved me. Wrong. It was just that I was the one who was the biggest sucker for his lies. Now that I see it clearly, I realize that feeling jealous, insecure, distrusting, angry, depressed, anxious, needy, and full of rage isn't what love is about. I can't believe I ever thought that feeling emotionally tormented or blown apart was even in the same ballpark as love. That's not love. It's trauma bonds. Susan.